Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON Samstapacharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishupad Paramahangsa Brahmacharya Asadhara Situshi Shriman His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantya Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bharagana Shri Jeev Gopala Dasagana Shri Goswami ki jai. Premjigo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakun Radhakun Giri Govindam ki jai. Matharadam ki jai. Vrindavan ki jai. Mayapurdam ki jai. Udiptam ki jai. Puridam ki jai. Ayodhidam ki jai. ISKCON Ljubljana ki jai. Dhammayi ki jai. Dhammayi ki jai. Srimati Bhakti Devi ki jai. Srimati Tulsi Devi ki jai. Shri Panchatattva ki jai. Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Gaur Brahmanande. Hare Krishna. Shri Guru Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. He's gotten a little bigger and a little noisier. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Grivanadari Gopi Jana Ballabha Grivanadari Yasodananda Braja Janarandana Yasodananda Braja Janarandana Yamuna Kiha Vanachari Yamuna Kiha Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Grivanadari Gopi Jana Ballabha Grivanadari Yasodananda Prahladananda Yasodananda Prahladananda Yamunatiha Vanachari Yamunatiha Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Jai Vishnupad Paramhamsa Brahmadakacharya Asadhara Shri Shriman His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Harival Slava Zabrani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Gaurangi Om Aganatvanandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vidham Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakan Zita Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabandha Gopate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakan Shena Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashubhanu Sudha Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapo Tribhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranityananda Shadvaiti Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1 Chapter 13 Dhritarashtra quits home text number starting with text number 9 Kaya Ritya Vartitam Vas Charad Bi Shiti Mandalam Tirtani Kshetra Mukhyani Sevitanta Bhutale Kaya Ritya Vartitam Vash Charadi Shiti Mandalam Tirtani Kshetra Mukhyani Sevitaniha Bhutale
Ladies, Kaya, by which Vidya means Vartitam, maintain your livelihood. Vaha, your good self. Charabhi, while traveling. Shiti Mandalam, on the surface of the earth. Tirthani, places of pilgrimage. Kshetra Mukhyani, the principal holy places. Sevitani, served by you. Iha, in this world. Utale, on this planet. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. While traveling on the surface of the earth, how did you maintain your livelihood? At which holy places and pilgrimage sites did you render service? Purport. Vidura went out from the palace to detach himself from household affairs, especially political intrigues. As referred to herein before, he was practically insulted by Duryodhanas, calling him the son of a Shudrani, although it was not out of place to talk loosely in the case of one's grandmother. Vidura's mother, although a Shudrani, was the grandmother of Duryodhana, and funny talks are sometimes allowed between grandmother and grandchildren. But because the remark was an actual fact, it was unpalatable talk to Vidura, and it was accepted as a direct insult. He therefore decided to quit his parental house and prepare for the renounced order of life. The preparatory stage is called Vanaprastha, ashram, or retired life for traveling and visiting the holy places on the surface of the earth. In the holy places of India like Vrindavan, Hardwar, Jagannath Puri, and Prayag, there are many great devotees, and there are still free kitchen houses for persons who desire to advance spiritually. Maharaj Yudhisthira was inquisitive to learn whether Vidura maintained himself by the mercy of the free kitchen houses, chatras. Text 10. Bhavad Vidas Bhagavatas Tirtha Bhutak Swayam Vivo Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani Swantakstena Katha Brutaha. My Lord, devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. Purport. The personality of God is omnipresent by His diverse potencies everywhere, just as the power of electricity is distributed everywhere within space. Similarly, the Lord's omnipresence is perceived and manifested by His unalloyed devotees like Vidura, just as electricity is manifested in an electric bulb. A pure devotee like Vidura always feels the presence of the Lord everywhere. He sees everything in the potency of the Lord and the Lord in everything. The holy places all over the earth are meant for purifying the polluted consciousness of the human being by an atmosphere surcharged with the presence of the Lord's unalloyed devotees. If anyone visits a holy place, he must search out the pure devotees residing in such holy places, take from them, try to apply such instructions in practical life, and thus gradually prepare oneself for the ultimate salvation, going back to Godhead. To To go to some holy place of pilgrimage does not mean only to take a bath in the Ganges or the Jamuna, or to visit temples situated in those places. One should also find representatives of Vidura who have no desire in life save and except to serve the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead is always with such pure devotees because of their unalloyed service, which is without any tinge of fruitive action or utopian speculation. They are in the actual service of the Lord, specifically by the process of hearing and chanting. The pure devotee hears from the authorities and chants, sings and writes of the glories of the Lord. Mahamuni Vyasadeva heard from Narada, and then he chanted in writing. Shukadeva Goswami studied from his father, and he described it to Parikshit. That is the way of Srimad Bhagavatam. Their actions, the pure devotees of the Lord, can render any place into a place of pilgrimage. And the holy places are worth a name only on their account. Such pure devotees are able to rectify the polluted atmosphere of any place, and what to speak of a holy place rendered unholy by the questionable actions of interested persons try to adopt a professional life at the cost of the reputation of a holy place. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srimavadi Paskyadyade Sadarna. In the first verse, Yudhisthira Maharaj inquires from Vidura about his traveling to the holy places, the tirthas. So we know from Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion that there are 5 powerful processes of pure devotional service, which are all meant to fix our consciousness upon Krishna, as described here. To be able to put Krishna, his name, his forms, experience his qualities, his associates, and their pastimes within our heart, so that we're actually in the spiritual world associating with Krishna. That there's no, when it says that there's no difference between devotional service and the kingdom of God, it means that pure devotional service will automatically put one entranced in Krishna consciousness. But that's pure devotional service, as we read yesterday in the Bhagavad Gita, without material desires, without, as Prabhupada writes, utopian speculation. So, as we know that there's a process, but one of the processes to perform one of these 5 powerful processes, one of the process to become in Krishna conscious trance. Now there's a principal process in this age. Then there's hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, worshiping the deities, and living in a holy place, either in a temple in Vrindavan, or as it says here, that there's no difference between the holy place and in pure devotional service. In other words, if we put the real Vrindavan in our consciousness. In order to do that, as I mentioned yesterday, instantly and with any kind of intensity, we can actually experience spiritual energy, spiritual experience, we have to come to the platform of Nishta, liberation. In the Gita, Krishna talks about 2 levels. Preliminary level, where we're striving to come to liberation. We're striving to get free from our attachment. That is, anxiety what the results will be of our work, whether good or bad. We're hoping that's be good, and we're always lamenting that in the past. Getting free from these 2 things. And now we may think I'm not meant, but actually that's all we do in the material world is speculate. We're just seeing things in relation to our mental. We think here's a man, here's a woman, they're from this country, they're so old. Relative point of view, of course, there's no such thing as Slovenia, that's a concoction. There's no such thing as America. If you go up far enough into the sky, there's no land called Slovenia or Croatia or America. It's just a mental conception. And as far as we're being a man or woman, if you put on a green dress or a white pants, you don't become white. You don't become a white pants, nor do you become a green dress. So these bodies are not our actual selves; they're simply coverings for our real self. So if we simply see the external covering, and we forget about the real person inside, that's certainly, we can say it's ignorance, but ignorance is a product of mental speculation. Ignorance is another way of saying mental speculation. Seeing things as one thing, but actually there's something completely different. Even seeing things incompletely is a kind of mental speculation, not seeing things properly or completely. Therefore, we can perform any of these 5 processes, but then we should understand what is the process, or as I said, there are 2 different levels. One to come to liberation, our material desires and our speculations, and the other is beyond that when we're actually situated in Krishna consciousness. We actually experience not only the loving exchanges between Krishna and his devotees, but we can also experience our own feelings towards Krishna and his devotees, spiritual feelings. So that begins at Ruchi, where everything we can actually experience the flavor of transcendental consciousness, the taste, we could say, or the ecstasy or love we want to put into it of transcendental experience. So there's a process, and we have to know what the process is, so we can know when we're watching ourselves doing activities, because that's what we're basically doing. We're the consciousness within the body, and we're watching ourselves performing activities, what we think is ourselves. We're watching this body, we're watching our mind, and we can course correct by our desire what our body is doing, what our mind is doing, by our desire. In other words, that's our influence over our existence right now, is our desire. Now, if we think we're the doer, of course, we want to understand that what is desirable and what's not desirable. We'll just be doing things, and not necessarily with intelligence, in spiritual intelligence at least. We can have a lot of material intelligence and do things very expertly and be completely an illusion, have no spiritual intelligence whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the more expert people become in the field, material field, a lot of times they lose their spiritual perspective on things. They become very much attached to being the doer, and therefore they're more into their false ego than into reality. In any case, so we should first of all understand what the process of liberation is, because otherwise we won't know if what we're doing is liberating us or not. Because liberation is the background for a transcendental experience. First we become liberated, or as Prabhupada said, the art of Krishna consciousness, this is Krishna book in the introduction. The art of Krishna consciousness is first of all to focus our mind upon Krishna. That's called liberation, process of liberation, and then give our love to Krishna. Once we're liberated, then we can give our heart to Krishna. And then we're actually in consciousness of Krishna. So that's defined, as I said yesterday, Yesham antakatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvanva mohanera muktva bhajante mam drida vrataha. Yesham antakatam papam. Those who have become free from their sinful activities, sinful conceptions, sinful desires, not only in their past lives, but even in this lifetime, who have acted piously and conquered sinful reactions, can engage himself in, free from the duality of delusion, can engage themselves in my service with determination. So that's what we're trying to come to the platform of Nishta, liberation, Brahmabhuta, where we become Prasanatma. We become joyful because we don't have anything to be anxiety about anymore. In other words, we actually understand things properly, therefore there's nothing to hanker for in the world, there's nothing to lament over. The only advantage of having a material body is it can be utilized in Krishna's service, and therefore deepen our consciousness of Krishna. So the process is that one should follow, first of all, religious principles. So everywhere in the world, there's, practically speaking, or at least there used to be, some genuine religious principles which are outlined as austerity, mercy, cleanliness, and truthfulness. That's like the foundation. Otherwise, Maya will take our consciousness away. If one has engaged in illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, intoxication, etc., then Maya is right there. She takes our consciousness away from Krishna and puts it on the body and the senses and the mind for material sense gratification. So without practicing austerity, cleanliness, truthfulness, and mercy, there's no question of spiritual life. There's no question of a sane material life either. Therefore, anyone can concoct and say, you don't have to follow the regular principles and everything will be all right. Well, it won't be all right. You'll have to suffer if you don't break any of the principles. But if you keep on chanting Hare Krishna, you might, and if you're sincere, you might eventually get the spiritual strength so that you can follow these regular principles, and therefore get free from the preliminary problems of suffering in the material world. But it's not that it's okay to do whatever you want with your senses and everything will be all right. No, lust is always sinful, however you want to present it. Lust, anger, and greed. Krishna doesn't say sometimes they're sinful or not. This is the basis of material existence, of material illusion. Trividha narakasyedam dwaram nashitam atmanaha kama krodha tata lobhas tasmat etam trayam chajet. There are three gates leading to hell. Now, we may not like it, what Krishna says. One time Prabhupada was giving initiation, and he asked the devotee, what are the four regular principles? And he said, no illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating, no intoxication. And then Prabhupada said, which one do you like the most? So it is not that we just take initiation and we got free from these things, but it's an opportunity to follow the process by which they can actually get purified. In any case, that's the preliminary. For the next stage, we have to act piously. Now in this age, helping little old ladies across the street may be a little pious, but it may not be so pious. What's really pious is to engage in chanting Hare Krishna. That's the main pious activity, and devotional service. Because even you give people in charity food, of course distributing prasadam is devotional service, but if you just give people money on the street to buy some food, they may buy some drugs, and you get implicated in your so-called charity. Therefore, one has to be aware of what's actually pious and what's not pious. Pravitim cha, niritim cha, janana vido asara, desocham napichacharo, nasatyam teshu vidyate. Pravitim cha, those who are pravitim, those who know it to be done, and niritim, what's not to be done. The asuras, who are asuras, those who are not godly or demons, we call them demons sometimes, but of course doesn't mean a little person with a tail and two horns. means one who doesn't follow Scripture, one who doesn't know what's to be done and what's not to be done. And if they don't know what's to be done, neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truthfulness will actually be in them. And therefore they'll deny Krishna's existence. They'll concoct a whole thing about how things could come about. Maya will give one a whole perspective on the material existence. So we don't understand that lust and anger and greed, we have to give them up, and we have to do something positive. We have to follow chanting Hare Krishna, worshiping the deities, serving the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, do something positive for liberation from these things. Then we can conquer sinful reactions. In other words, if we understand what's to be done and what's not to be done, then when material thoughts come to our mind, when in the desire to do things outside of Krishna, or accept conceptions outside of Krishna consciousness, or to think of things outside of Krishna consciousness, then we can gradually conquer those things by our desires, by becoming more serious about Krishna consciousness, more consistent, more enthusiastic, more regulated in our habits. That's called conquering sinful reactions. We can only conquer them by becoming dependent upon Krishna. Basically believing that Krishna will protect me, that Krishna will maintain me, and attached to these other conceptions of life. Then one can actually accept real devotional service. Then one's activities will actually be dedicated to following the orders of the acharyas in disciple succession, according to Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, according to the guidance of the Paramatma within my heart, and doing it for Krishna, to please Krishna. What would be pleasing, doing what's pleasing for Krishna, and doing it to please Krishna. We can actually accept real devotional service, and then rise up to the platform of understanding Krishna in truth. As we become more focused on Krishna, more enthusiastic about Krishna consciousness, as Krishna reveals himself, mostly out of compassion, because when the devotee makes advancement, it's not that he becomes proud, he becomes more humble. He realizes how insignificant he is and how wonderful Krishna is, how wonderful all of Krishna's devotees are, and therefore the real humility awakens within one's heart, and one always feels himself meek and humble, because he's in love with everyone, and therefore love and humility go together. You can't really love someone if you feel puffed up and superior to them. You have to feel a servant to them. So one can meditate, one can actually rise to the real knowledge of Krishna, one can understand who Krishna really is by experiencing Krishna in truth. His loving feelings towards his devotees, his protection of them, his attitude even towards the non-devotees, the demons, when he kills them, what kind of mood he does it in, and whether does he really kill them or does he liberate them, etc. So one should understand Krishna in truth, then one can meditate in trance out of love on Krishna. One can never forget him, because the happiness and the love one feels towards Krishna is, one is always, one has no other interest except for Krishna's interest, and one is always feeling meek and humble, in love with Krishna. So our acharyas, those are the ones, like Prabhupada, who are always in trance. Whether we talk about Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, or Gorkishore Das Babaji, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to be an acharya, an actual acharya, you have to have risen to the highest platform of Krishna consciousness. You have to be able to turn that place into a place of pilgrimage, like Vidura here. If you can't do that, then you're not on that platform. And if you imitate it, it won't work. The example is given, if a woman is not pregnant and she makes the sounds of giving birth, it doesn't mean anything's going to happen. So if one is believing that one tries to imitate, put on a show, so-called sometimes for the interest of the followers that they can have some faith, but that kind of faith is absurd. Faith will be developed by actual experience in Krishna consciousness, and Krishna consciousness, we can't cheat Krishna. Krishna knows exactly who we are and what we're doing, because he's the one who's doing it. So he knows if we want to cheat, then he manifests ourselves as a cheater. And we want to be sincere, then we be honest with ourselves and with others, and therefore we can present things according to our level and not confuse people and misdirect them so easily. So, the symptoms of a person who is able to turn the place into a place of pilgrimage, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has explained in his commentary, because Prabhupada, for instance, in Nectar of Instruction, he points out that there are symptoms of a Mahabhagavat. Now, if one wants to read a purport, one may believe that Prabhupada is inconsistent and he's saying one thing one place, another thing another place. But Prabhupada said that this philosophy is the most consistent, exacting, and voluminous due to the unbreakable system of disciple succession. So it's the same thing repeated again and again, but sometimes it's put in a way for our immediate perception because we don't have the ability to perceive the more subtle things, and therefore the more gross things, the more obvious things are presented. Like Prabhupada, for instance, he points out that who's an Uttama Adhikari? Vidura here is an Uttama Adhikari, displaying the qualities of an Uttama Adhikari, being recognized as an Uttama Adhikari by Maharaj Yudhisthira, because he's turning those places into a place of pilgrimage. Because he's actually carrying Krishna within his heart. Not some idea of Krishna, not even a picture of Krishna, but he's actually carrying the real Krishna within his heart, the actual personality of Godhead. Therefore, Krishna turns everything into a place of pilgrimage. For those who are willing to perceive him, I mean, Krishna was directly on top of Kamsa, but Kamsa was not in the mood of accepting Krishna out of love and devotion, so that Krishna was going to reveal his transcendental rasa to Kamsa. He was right on the top of Kamsa. Kamsa got the benefit. He got beaten to death by Krishna. Therefore, every punch was transcendental towards his liberation, but it wasn't towards rasa. Because he had the wrong mood. Similarly, we can become directly in front of Krishna, like we do now, the deities, and we're thinking sometimes that they're just statues, but they're actually not different from Krishna. But it depends upon our level of consciousness, how much Krishna can reveal himself to us. So, Prabhupada writes that the pure devotee, for instance, in one part of the Nectar of Instruction, verse number 5, he says that an Uttama Adhikari can be understood, he's always chanting at least 16 rounds a day. So, I mean, does that mean we become an Uttama Adhikari because we're chanting 16 rounds a day? He's following all the rules and regulations. Now that's a little bit more difficult because we don't even know what they are most of the time. And he's 24 hours a day engaged in trying to spread Krishna consciousness. Now that's a real that's a real challenge. Every thought, every deed, every activity, everything we're doing is simply to spread Krishna consciousness. Anyone here can claim that they're on that level? Everyone we look at, we're simply meditating deeply in trance. How can I help them advance in Krishna consciousness as their most humble servant, praying to the super soul within our heart to give us the intelligence how to do it? That would be quite an advancement for ourselves. On the other hand, at the end, when Prabhupada summarizes it all, he said that a pure devotee is assimilated the entire Bhagavad Gita. It's not that he has to read it all the time. Everywhere he looks, all he sees is Bhagavad Gita. All he sees is Krishna everywhere. And the philosophy that's expressed as a reality, as a living experience. And he's realized his own spiritual identity. He doesn't think, not only he's beyond the bodily concept of life, but he actually knows who he really is. What's his eternal relation with Krishna, one of the 5 principal rasas. And at the same time, he's realized that there's no difference between Krishna and his name. When he chants Hare Krishna, it's not just like a little bit of experience. It's actually Krishna, and the whole spiritual world is there when he's chanting Hare Krishna. And his every deed, his every activity, his every thought, his every word, his every desire is simply to spread Krishna consciousness to others out of pure love for Krishna and for everyone. Such a person should be accepted as a Mahabhagavat, and everything one has should be offered to him. Especially the brahmacharis who go and collect should offer everything to such a Mahabhagavat. But if one is not actually on that level, and he imitates a Mahabhagavat, he's sure to become degraded. Therefore, Prabhupada writes that one should try to understand what level all the devotees are on. Not sentimentally, but practically. And one should try to understand one's own level of spiritual advancement, objectively, as much as possible, so that one can actually engage properly in the loving exchanges. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us that one should accept, I don't know if Prabhupada immediately says that. Shastra check. So this is Nectar Instruction, text 5. So nice that we don't have to carry on all the Prabhupada's books with us. We can just have our trusty little, what is this? Okay. The devotee should know his own position, not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher platform. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints to the effect that an Uttama Adhikari can be recognized by his ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. So, our example is Srila Prabhupada, or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. They at least put many souls on the path towards Vaishnavism. To be an actual Vaishnava or Vaishnavi is not so easy. But at least they put so many souls on the path to following 4 regular principles and following the process of devotional service. Now others also are empowered by Srila Prabhupada through his mercy, through our acharyas, and they've also manifested to different degrees the potency of Krishna. Otherwise there's no meaning of disciple succession. But there's no one in history who's done more than Srila Prabhupada in translating books of transcendental books and going around the world opening temples, spreading Krishna consciousness, displaying an ideal life, an ideal influencing so many devotees in all different nationalities and races and religions to take up the process, etc., etc. And he did it in the beginning without any help whatsoever. Nowadays we may have some examples, very sincere, dedicated devotees who have a lot of disciples, but a lot of times they don't personally make the disciples make the disciples, etc., etc. And a lot of times they don't stay either, because some of our devotees that we make are not so fixed up in Krishna consciousness. And they have this whole idea nowadays, which is just like a good the idea that you need personal association with your guru in order to spiritual advance, which is something exactly the opposite of what Prabhupada said, and is a good opportunity for everyone to, get into trouble spiritually. Because as soon as you think like that, then you'll probably neglect the devotees who have the best opportunity to help you. on every level. You won't be able to understand how, by taking instructions from the superior authority, we have to individually take instructions. We have to take responsibility for our own lives. Not that we have to get physical association with someone. As soon as we lose that physical association, then we're in trouble. No, we have to have the Vani, the instructions coming through disciple succession. That's how the acharyas became acharyas, not by sticking close to their spiritual master physically, is by sticking close to their instructions. That's how they became acharyas. And if we're going to spiritual advance, we have to do the same thing also. Association is good if we see the instructions through the physical association. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us a hint that one can understand an Uttama by his ability to convert many others into Vaishnavism. That one should not become a spiritual master unless he's attained the level of Uttama. So this, of course, this whole thing of Prabhupada must have made Uttama. Really? You mean Prabhupada just waved his hand and people became Uttama? Didn't matter what their previous desires were, what their present devotional activities were. He just waved his hand and made Uttama. No, it's not possible. Otherwise, how did so many of our so-called Uttama that Prabhupada so-called made got into so much trouble because they imitated Uttama? No, Prabhupada made devotees, sincere devotees. That's why we still have a movement, to carry on the movement and empower them by his instructions and by his example. But that doesn't mean that necessarily one automatically becomes an Uttama. Otherwise, where did all the Uttama go that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada made? The only one that we actually know of factually is Prabhupada in terms of actually fulfilling the requirements of Uttama. Then Prabhupada writes that a neophyte devotee and intermediate devotee can also accept disciples, but such disciples should be on the same level and should be understood they can't advance very well due to their insufficient guidance. Therefore, one should be careful to accept an Uttama as one's spiritual master. So what does that mean? Does that mean we've all become Ritviks? No, it doesn't mean we all become Ritviks. It means that the Ritviks are not entirely wrong, and we're not entirely right to condemn the Ritviks. In other words, Prabhupada did appoint Ritviks. That's the May conversation. He did appoint Ritviks, and more or less, until we come to the platform of, disciple succession means you're acting as a representative, trying to act as a representative of the previous acharya. Does it mean that there's no initiations? No, but there has to be initiations with the proper understanding. If the spiritual master is in our societies giving initiations and thinking he's doing so as an Uttama Adhikari, or that his disciples should believe he's an Uttama Adhikari, and he has to put on a show of being an Uttama Adhikari, then that's called pretension, and there won't be any spiritual advancement, because we're not supposed to pretend, we're supposed to try to become an Uttama Adhikari by acting as a Madhyama Adhikari at least. And even if we are an Uttama Adhikari, still we should act like a Madhyama Adhikari. Madhyama Adhikari means we should try to love Krishna, we should try to cooperate with the devotees, we should try to help the innocent, we should try to give up our association with non-devotees, our attachment to them. So the example is Srila Prabhupada. Now Srila Prabhupada, we say he's the founder Acharya or the principal Shiksha Guru. But Prabhupada's not just the principal Shiksha Guru. He is the Acharya founder, he's the Acharya of our society. He's the source by which everyone else is empowered to one degree or another to become conscious of Krishna and to spread it. And when we take initiation, for instance, then the idea of taking initiation is basically so we can develop a service attitude. In other words, obedience. It's not that we take initiation. We should be convinced that this devotee is as good as Krishna. Not that he is Krishna, but the instructions he's going to give me are all in line of devotional service. They're all following Srila Prabhupada's desire. He may not be, or she may not be in the future, simply on the level of Uttamadhikari, but they have to be at least on the level of fixed in devotional service, enough that they're simply being instruments for the previous Acharya, like Srila Prabhupada is an instrument for the previous Acharya, his spiritual master. And therefore, whatever they give to their disciples is exactly in line with disciple succession. And if it's not, that's why Prabhupada formed a society of devotees, ISKCON, so that the godbrothers or the devotees can help each other become fixed in this consciousness of Prabhupada, fixed in the consciousness of pure devotional service. And therefore, if there is sometimes some kind of deviation, great or small, it can be course corrected, and people can understand gradually, either by hearing or by experience, what the proper path is to becoming conscious of Krishna, of reviving our personal relationship with Krishna. Because it's not like a contest, you become an Uttamadhikari and there's only a certain number who can become Uttamadhikaris. Everyone should become an Uttamadhikari. There's unlimited Vaikuntha planets, and there's Goloka Vrindavan just filled with unlimited pure devotees of Krishna. And we're all supposed to become pure devotees and go back there. So it's not a competition who's going to become Uttamadhikari. It's a competition of who's going to become the best servant of the servant of Krishna. So assist Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, and therefore become more absorbed in Krishna consciousness, actual consciousness of Krishna. Actually, steadily glorifying Krishna is explained here, steadily with determination, serving the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and realizing, experiencing the wonderful effect of becoming constantly absorbed in, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Payas Varsheva Saktatma Vindyat Yatmini Yatsukam Sabrahma Yoga Yuktatma Sukam Akshayam Ashnute. Such a person is always in trance, meditating. Such a person is always in trance, meditating. Such a person is not attracted to material sense gratification or external objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure from within. In this way, the self-realized souls can enjoy unlimited happiness because they concentrate on the Supreme. So that's our goal. Besides spreading Krishna consciousness to others, our real goal is to actually give up all these material desires and to be always in trance, loving Krishna and his devotees and serving them from within, and enjoying unlimited transcendental happiness because we're concentrating on the Supreme. That's our goal for everyone. Doesn't matter what our position is, doesn't matter what our past is, that's what we're supposed to strive for and go forward towards. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? And the other thing is, the last word, if we don't recognize Srila Prabhupada as that Acharya that everyone takes their example from and instructions from, we won't be able to understand who else is an Acharya, to what degree they are. We can't see Prabhupada and understand him and accept him, then everyone else becomes elevated in Krishna consciousness, and to the degree they've understood, to the degree that they understand, they put into practice Prabhupada's example and instructions. To that degree, they make spiritual advancement. And that applies for all of us. When we see other devotees, we should see how they're manifesting Prabhupada's and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desires, or Acharya's desires, how they're putting into practice, and how they're experiencing Krishna consciousness for themselves and giving it to others. Any questions, comments? Also, I have some prasadam here. So I guess everyone's asking, when are you going to distribute it? All right, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande. So I hope I have enough for everyone, but I have enough for someone. So first come, first serve.